Alright then. Right, good evening everybody. My name is Jon Ellison and yeah, welcome to an evening with Jon Ellison. And basically, as Keith said, I'm going to be talking about my life and films, how they've inspired me to become a filmmaker, and I'll show you a brief clip of films I've done as well. Yeah, and as I said, I haven't presented, well, as Keith said, I haven't presented in Yonks, so forgive me if I waffle or if I screw up, because sometimes I believe I have Tourette's syndrome. Alright, so here we go. Right, who here was around when the first video came out? Oh, how interesting. Yeah, being that I was born in 1990, I grew up in an age where videos were quite popular. And yeah, it was a decade and a half after the foundation of videos, also referred to as VHSs, I forget what it stands for. We had a collection of videos ourselves, half of it was blank, which means we taped stuff off the television. And we taped a few films, including some Disney ones, i.e. Dumbo, Mary Poppins, Sleeping Beauty, Sword in the Stone, Robin Hood, which was the reason why I became a left-winger. And I suppose you probably heard about Brian Bedford. He's passed away the same week as David Bowie and Alan Rickman. Yeah, I know, same illness as well. And of course Pinocchio, which I class as my favourite one, particularly just what I got out of it was, well, it's a dangerous world out there, and as you can see, he's just made a literal jackass out of himself. Goes to show that kids have to be mindful of dangerous things in the world, pedophiles, pickpockets. I mean, Disney wouldn't dare call it pedophilia. You know what I mean? But I think this is a message that goes for adults too, because I've come across people who are trying to change my religion, I don't have one, and trying to get my bank details, if you get what I mean. Yeah. Of course, if you want the non-Disney ones, we also taped Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Witches, the first 3 Wallace and Gromit episodes, and 3 Steven Spielberg ones, like Book and E.T., which I'm going to talk about later on, and Jurassic Park. Now, I presume most of you have seen it. I was going to show you a clip of this scene. Yeah, there's a scene where a man gets hassled on the lavatory by a T-Rex. Yeah, me and my brother laughed at that bit. Personally, I prefer this scene to Psycho. Basically, because being found in the shower nude is one thing, but being hassled on the bog, I'd be more humiliated. Not that he was doing his business, of course. But I suppose that was one of the minor things Steven Spielberg would point out. My dad's uncle owned a wide collection of videos. And basically when he passed away, and I think I was about 3 or 4 at the time, we claimed ownership to some of his videos. You could say we inherited them. And I'm going to play you a clip from one of the shows and or films which we was introduced to. And yeah, I don't know why it does that. So I'm going to have to show you a clip like YouTube. Yeah, that was the Three Stooges, which was one of the old shows my Uncle Pete had on video. And oh my god, it kicked ass. Yeah, we would go around his house and watch a few of his videos. And we was also introduced to a few of our old shows and films, like Laurel and Hardy, some of the silent comedians, a few documentaries, and some old cartoons, i.e. the Hanna-Barbera ones. Which brings me neatly onto my first cinematic experience. What I mean to say is the very first feature I saw in the cinema. And of course I was 4 at the time, and I don't remember my life very much at the cinema before then. And this film that we saw, that was the first one I saw, was the live action version of the Flintstones. And I'll show you a brief clip, I presume.
Busy with that, Mr. Flintstone. Besides, reading is my job. You wouldn't want to put poor little old me out of work now, would you?
No. Your wife. Your wife.
My wife. Wilma? Wilma! What a surprise!
So it would seem.
Miss Stone, I'd like you to meet my wife, Mrs. Flagstone, and our daughter, isn't she beautiful? My family.
I've heard so much about you.
Well, I wish that I could say the same.
Oh, they'll be all, Miss Stone. I'll sign those documents and place them on your desk.
Whatever you want.
Your secretary is very attractive.
Really? I hadn't noticed. Did I mention she chisels 18 words a minute? Hey, Wilma, did you ever see one of these? My wife is the most beautiful gal in Bedrock.
My wife is the most beautiful gal in Bedrock.
Nice try, Fred.
Nice try, Fred.
Fred! I've come to talk about the Rubble's troubles.
Yeah, that was a clip from the Flintstones movie. The very first film I saw in the cinema. I know a lot of people. I know it's getting a lot of hate mail nowadays, and I think reviewers have given it hate mail ever since. But as a kid, I remember being real impressed with the way they analysed the cartoon and managed to get the costumes, and they analysed the intro and the outro, all that. I mean, it goes back to the time when my Uncle Pete had a few episodes of the Flintstones on video, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I think this is an underrated classic. Personally, I remember what I learned from it was a few political messages. I also learned that from Mary Poppins and Robin Hood. I mean, all I got out of it was themes of office politics, and I should mention that what you've just seen is Fred getting seduced by a secretary, which might have been controversial for kids, but even so, we didn't really mind that. We didn't really mind seeing stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't like she was showing her tits. And basically, he just heard Wilma saying, "I've come to talk about the Rubble's troubles." He's just been promoted as vice president, and has been ordered by his evil boss to lay off some of the quarry workers, including Barney and all the others. So they start living in poverty, Fred soon regrets that. But those of you who haven't seen it, I recommend at least one viewing. I won't spoil the rest of it. Also, we had a Commodore 64. Yeah, I know, it sounds a bit crappy. But it used to belong to my cousin. And two of the games we had relate to two of the other following films we saw in cinemas. One of them is Hunchback of Notre Dame. And yeah, before this one came out, I think most viewers were probably familiar with the Victor Hugo story, but my first knowledge came with a simplistic Commodore 64 game. But I remember there was a trailer coming out, and I was like, I gotta see this movie. So one summer we watched it, and I enjoyed it straight away. Even had some of the figurines given to me on my cinematic viewing. And I'm just going to show you a brief clip. So, okay, so.
I just shaved this morning.
Oh, really? You missed a spot.
All right. Just calm down. Just give me a chance to apologize.
For what?
That, for example.
You sneaky son of a...
Watch it. You're in church.
Are you always this charming, or am I just lucky?
Candlelight. Privacy. Music. Can't think of a better place for hand-to-hand combat. You fight almost as well as a man.
Funny. I was going to say the same thing about you.
That's hitting a little below the belt, don't you think?
No, this is.
Touche. Didn't know you had a kid.
Well, he doesn't take kindly to soldiers.
I noticed. Permit me. I'm Phoebus. It means sun god. And you are...
Is this an interrogation?
It's called an introduction.
You're not arresting me?
Not as long as you're in here. I can't.
You're not at all like the other soldiers.
Thank you.
So, if you're not going to arrest me, what do you want?
I'd settle for your name.
Esmeralda.
Beautiful. And much better than Phoebus, anyway. Good work, Captain. Now, arrest her. Claim sanctuary. Say it.
You tricked me.
I'm waiting, Captain.
I'm sorry, sir. She claimed sanctuary. There's nothing I can do.
Then drag her outside and...
No, you will not touch her.
Don't worry. Minister Frodo learned years ago to respect the sanctity of the church.
All right, I'm going. You think you've outwitted me, but I'm a patient man, and gypsies don't do well inside stone walls.
What are you doing?
I was just imagining a rope around that beautiful neck.
I know what you were imagining.
Such a clever witch. So typical of your kind to twist the truth to cloud the mind with unholy thoughts. Well, no matter. You've chosen a magnificent prison, but it is a prison nonetheless. Set one foot outside, and you're mine.
You know, the kids. Yeah. Hunchback of Notre Dame is basically one of those films you can easily watch without any adults could watch without needing the accompaniment of a kid. And yes, I suppose you probably some of you were giggling when Frodo was sniffing his hair. I mean, yeah, that was an old man sniffing a young lady's hair. And yeah, this was one of my favourites as a kid. And yeah, we had some figurines. In fact, we had a piece when we had our first PC. We had a game which was related to that, and I frequently played it. We also bought it on VHS, and I also had a colouring book. Yeah, I know. We also, and speaking of Commodore 64s, we also had one based on Star Wars, which brings me neatly onto the next film I'm going to talk about, which is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And that film came out when I was 9. The first 3 came out way before I was born, so I didn't get a chance to see it in cinemas. I mean, there were occasional TV viewings, but yeah, this was the first Star Wars film I saw in the pictures. And my God, weren't they good memories. And I know it's had bad reviews as well, but I would say this, that if you're wanting to see a film, take no notice of the reviews and judge for yourselves. That's my advice. Because I obviously ignore reviews most of the time. I mean, if it's a film I want to see. In fact, I'm going to show you one of my favourites from this. So, let's see if I can. Excuse, I might only be able to show you a bit of this, because it's quite a long I can only show you a bit of it because we're running a bit short on time. So basically, this fight scene, I have to say, out of every Star Wars film I've seen, is my favourite fighting scene, if you get what I mean. I mean, I suppose most of us were used to seeing people standing still as statues while. But this has included constant vaulting, somersaulting, and fast-paced lightsaber action, and other gymnastically awesome activities, as you've just seen from Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. I remember really loving that one, and I remember wanting to copy it. Now, if I had a favourite film that I would class as my all-time favourite, I'd give that point to E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Not because it broke the box office records, that would be a pathetic excuse. But one thing, it's nostalgia, as I said, it's one of the films we take onto television for occasional viewings. And there's some things that make me fall in love with this film so much. I mean, I love the opening, I love the ending, I love how the two protagonists communicate and how they bond together. And communication, did I mention the communication? And I'll show you yet another clip. This one from one of my favourite scenes. Don't worry, it's not going to be the ending.
It must be dead. 'Cause I don't know how to feel. someplace else now. I believe in you all my life. Every day. E.T. I love you. E.T. phone home. Does this mean they're coming? Yes. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home. Shut up. Oh, phone home. Quiet. Phone. You shut up. Phone home. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home. Phone home. Oh. Elliot, why don't you come with me? No. Would you like the flowers?
My God, I get so emotional watching that scene. I was going to show you the ending, but for those who haven't seen E.T., well, I'd recommend it, so I won't give away the ending. See, this bond has a huge impact on me because I know so many people who struggle with social lives. I mean, I've got a lady friend who lives in Derby, and she finds it real hard to make friends. And social lives can be really hard for young children. That's basically that's one of the things I love about it. I mean, also the cinematography, you can see the silhouette in front of the moon, and the music. John Williams, personally my favourite composer. Too much to mention about this film. Now, many people get asked, many kids get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And obviously I was no exception. I was kind of unsure. I mean, one of my career ideas was to join the police. But actually, another was to design a vehicle just like this. Yes, Thunderbirds was one of my favourite shows as a kid. And with that said though, Jerry Anderson is one of my heroes. I remember my childminder owning a video collection of Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and Stingray and Joe 90 and Supercar. And I remember this being digitally remastered when I was 10 years old and being broadcast on BBC Two. And I watched every single episode and got obsessed with it. And I remember getting really invested with the idea of rockets launching out of a swimming pool and palm trees clearing the way for a vehicle to launch. My dad also was a kid when this first came out, and he grew up with that show. And my mum also recalls how disgustingly pink Lady Penelope's Rolls Royce was. Some of you may be aware that 3 new episodes have been made, and I'm one of those guys who's booked a DVD. It's, I can't wait until it's delivered. I even remember watching the live action version when it came out, and oh my god, I didn't think it was as good as the show. I've never seen it. What do you expect from a live action version? But during my teens, I wanted to be a musician. And this goes back to the time when I got my first guitar at the age of 9 and started playing. And it was a crappy nylon string guitar. But I got an electric one when I was 11. And I began writing my own songs, I still do. And one of the musicians I wanted to be like was this guy. Yep, David Bowie. He's one of my favourites. Most of you have probably heard the recent news, and I was absolutely horrified when I heard. So I won't give any details. And the reason why, the reason why I admire this artist is because he has an artistic and a very open mind about music genres, ranging from glam rock and folk and post-punk, soul, disco. Tries out various new things. He's also a talented actor. But obviously my other, if I had other influences, they include these. Queen, who I'd probably find way impossible to cover. They've also tried out various genres. And some of their latest stuff I think is quite underrated. Like there's stuff from the Miracle album and Innuendo. The song that's playing right now is Invisible Man, which is my favourite song of theirs. Status Quo, who I consider always a pleasure to listen to. One of the most modern rock and roll bands in the history of the universe. Tell me this ain't rock and roll. The Stranglers, who I consider a criminally underrated punk band. Personally, I prefer them to the Jam, the Sex Pistols and the Clash. And I apologise to those fans of those bands. But I like them too. But I prefer this. And Deacon Blue, the latter which I once saw at a gig in Birmingham. Music influences led to myself to study AS Performing Arts, but my chance to demonstrate the music skills was limited, and I failed the course because of written work, which I struggled with. I did stay for another year to continue my studies for A2 film studies, which I'll explain later on. After I completed my A-levels, I went to Hinkley College to study BTEC First Diploma in Music, which I regretted. The reason being, my tutor was a hypocritical jerk, and putting me right down, and I felt capitalised throughout my studies. Plus, I missed learning about film, which I decided to go back to that. I mean, not to say that I don't want to start a band anymore. I still have an intention to start a band, which I'm going to talk about later. But in the meantime, after completing GCSEs, I did AS level performing arts, which I just said. Though I needed to study at least 2 subjects to stay on at school, so my second was A-level film studies, particularly because I had a wide knowledge of films. And though I failed performing arts, I happily continued film studies. With that said, I really bonded with the studies, and I remember a couple of cinema trips we went to. One of them was to see The Wind that Shakes Barley, the other was to see 300, and I'll always remember them. I remember watching 300 and being really cynical about the size of the elephants and rhinos. But when I watched it next, I thought, actually, this is better than I remember it. And because Long Slade, which I went to, requires a minimum of 2 subjects, I also did AS photography. in order to stay on. And though I completed my A-levels, I was so pessimistic about university and was still annoyed for the examiners for failing me on performing arts and, quite frankly, full of revenge. So I did music in Hinkley. Big mistake, which I said, and plus I'd so bonded with film. So after completing a year, I did OCR National Diploma in Media at South Leicester College, the same building which last year we filmed Pop outside of. And I liked it better, but media-wise I was only interested in film. I didn't have an interest in magazine publishing or radio, none of that. Well, but do you remember Tom and Matt? We did UK film studies. We produced a few films together, which I might explain briefly about. So after a couple of years, finally went to university, went to Northampton University, started out with a high national diploma in digital filmmaking. And it was a 2-year course, totally loved it. Some people were a bit incompetent when we started making our own films, but I think we got over those challenges. And apparently when you do a HND, you can top it up with a degree course. So I did BA Media Production, which it was enjoyable, not as good as the HND. I struggled a bit because one time we had to produce what you call a viral, and I had no idea what the hell that was. But there was one film which I was so proud of doing, and I think it's one of my favourite. Out of every one I've done, it's my favourite, which I'll talk about later on. And that one's called Magic Midget. Some of you may have seen it, but now that I have a 2-1, what did I get? A few months claiming job seekers allowance, a resignation from a catering agency, but then, believe it or not, this is my first anniversary with my home move, which my job at my home move is editing videos. A very good job. Only problem is it's a 1 day per week job. I mean, hours may extend, or I might get another job. Depends. We'll have to wait and see. Anything to get me out of that stadium. And speaking of my courses, what you're about to see is a mashup of some of the films I've worked on. Most of the following ones I did for my courses, so I'll just bring you that clip. I was going to play it via the computer, but let me show you how it's done.
Jesus Christ.
really you. Yep, that was a mashup of some of the films I worked on. And yeah, I hope I didn't embarrass you. Well, one of basically the captions you just saw, the top ones are, each of the top ones are the names of the films. The bottom ones are the job roles I took on. Magic Midship, for instance, which is the one I'm most proud of working on. We did have a few problems. The crew didn't, well, it was only a 2-day shot, but crew members didn't turn up. So I had to rely on those actors who wasn't on screen, ask them to do me a favour and hold the lights in position. But we got over that. It was originally going to be a Micro Machines movie, and I wanted to include a car race, a model car race in it. But Tutor thought, maybe you should just do the one sequence for now. And because he didn't want me to get stressed, so I thought, fair enough, I'll do that. Now, I was particularly aiming to be a film director at some point. I've got some favourites, but I'm just going to pick a few. So, yeah. One of my favourites is Terry Gilliam, who I think I describe as the British Tim Burton. Highly artistic mind for backgrounds, and he has a total observation with the world, sees things, has a huge interest in what's going on in the world. And I'm going to show you a clip which I'm most, this is a clip from Brazil, which is one of his
Next.
I want to report a wrongful arrest.
You want information adjustments, different department.
I've been to information adjustments. They sent me here. They said you have a form I need to fill out.
You got an arrest receipt.
Yeah.
Is it stamped?
Stamped?
No, there's no stamp on it, you see. I can't let you have the form until this is stamped.
Where do I get it stamped?
Information adjustments.
Right, pause there. That's going to be the next clip. Yeah, that scene in particular relates so much to me. The reason why, because I've had similar consequences. In fact, for instance, last year when I sprained my arm due to some accident on the bike, I had to go to the Leicester Royal Infirmary to get it x-rayed, and my God, I was like, you got to go to this ward, I've just been there, and it's like, urgh! And yes, just like this lady has just suffered. Another thing about Terry, and apparently he also hates bureaucracy. In fact, he also thinks he also is the kind of guy who thinks about the financial securities. I mean, I know usually the producer would do that, but he too does. I mean, for instance, some of you may have seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which he did with Terry Jones. that is a pure example of a low-budgeted film. It's one of those things that proves that you can achieve something even with a low budget. Well, you can achieve something. Obviously, you have to, think very clearly. The next director is Michael Moore. And if there's one director who does documentaries that I like the most, it's him. I mean, a lot of documentaries to me seem the same, but I know some people seem different. But yeah, his ones make a huge difference. I mean, like myself, he's a lefty. Yeah, I know. He takes a huge interest in politics and the world, just like myself. Falling for Columbine, which is about gun control, I'm going to show you a clip of in a bit. It sees Mike join the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, for a bit of observation. And he one time points out the time when this 6-year-old girl got shot by a boy who was carrying a gun. And this relates to the next clip, in which he has an interview with Charlton Heston, who was then the president, Rob Button, who was then president of the NRA. So
it wasn't like it was already planned. I mean, the choice to come there was made after this horrible killing took place. You know, had you known that, would you have come?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Do you think you'd like to just maybe apologize to the people in Flint for coming and doing that at that time, or
Do you want me to apologize? Me to apologize to the people in Flint?
you know, or the people in Columbine for coming after their horrible tragedy? I mean, why do you go to the places after they have these horrible tragedies? And I'm a member of your group here.
I'm afraid we don't agree on that.
Do you think it's okay to just come and show up at these events? You don't think it's okay? Mr. Heston, just one more thing. This is who she is, or was. This is her. Mr. Heston, please don't leave. Mr. Heston, please, take a look at her. This is the girl.
Yep, and that was an interview with they had with Charlton Heston, who was then president of the NRA. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to create awareness in the consequences that gun violence can lead to. I mean, the reason why he's asking him to apologise, I mean, because he was then president, and because this girl got shot, presumably by the son of some member of the NRA. But yeah, I think this in particular is quite a thought-provoking scene. And I'd recommend some of his documentaries. Also recommend Sicko, which is about the appalling appalling service provided by the American Health Service and the economy it's in. My next director is Ralph Bakshi. He's what I'd call the Martin Scorsese of animation. I mean, I say this because Martin aims most of his films for adults. In fact, that's the same with Ralph Bakshi. Excellent. He creates animated movies. I don't think I've ever seen Martin Scorsese make animated ones. For those of you who don't know, Ralph Bakshi, he directed TV episodes of Deputy Dog, that was another video my Uncle Pete used to own. And he also directed films, sorry, I don't know why I spit. He also directed films such as Fritz the Cat and Heavy Traffic and the animated version of Lord of the Rings, Fire and Ice and Wizards and Coonskin. Yeah, I know, bit of an offensive title. It's also also known as Busting Out. And it's about a trio of characters named Brother Rabbit, Preacher Fox and Brother Bear. Obviously references to the Brer Rabbit franchise. And they're surrounded by a lot of racial bigotry around where they live. And so they move to Harlem and form their own conservative organisation. And somehow you really feel for these guys. I mean, one of them gets into a confrontation with a racist and homophobic police officer. And the music in some of those films are quite jazzy, and you might have noticed some of the backgrounds are quite live action if you compare them to the animated characters. I mean, again, like Terry Gilliam, Ralph Bakshi shows how much you can achieve on such a low budget. I mean, these days you could use caps and you could use CGI. I mean, like on that clip of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you may have seen how epic the cathedral was on the inside, and that used caps animation, which not used nowadays, but was very common during the Disney Renaissance. If I had to pick a favourite director, that would be Steven Spielberg. I bet some of you were guessing that. Not because most of his films are blockbusters, that would be a pathetic excuse, but his work kind of speaks to me. And for instance, I've got one last clip, and this is of Schindler's List.
As soon as this occurs, I want that cloth distributed to the workers. 2.5 liters each. Also, each person is to get a bottle of vodka. They won't drink it, they know it's value. Likewise, those Egyptian cigarettes we organize.
It'll be done, everything you ask.
We've written a letter trying to explain things in case you were captured. Every worker has signed it.
Thank you.
Hebrew from the Talmud that says whoever saves one life saves the world entire.
What the hell's just happened? I'm very sorry about this. I don't know what the hell's happened. But yeah. Basically what you've just seen is a scene from Schindler's List about a guy who saved 1100 Jews from during the Holocaust by employing them in his factory. And I have to admit it's quite emotional and thought-provoking. I mean, what is Axe Stern, the one who's just given Oscar the ring, what what he's trying to tell him is he's made a difference and achieved something in life, as well as getting a hell load of people out of trouble. And I have to admit, he includes some of the best inspirational quotes in his movies in film history. I mean, I know some directors have as well. I mean, for instance, I bet some of you know which film Life Finds a Way is from. Have a guess. That's right, Vinny. Jurassic Park. And when I think of Life Finds a Way, I think of civilization and evolution and civilization. I shan't explain too much detail because we have to move on. And in some of his movies, he demonstrates point of view from children and those with childlike mind. And I mentioned on earlier about E.T. and the fact that it pictures a kid who doesn't have much of a social life. I also like to mention AI, artificial intelligence, which is about a robot kid. It's a sci-fi retelling of Pinocchio, and it's about a robot kid who is adopted by a couple whose son is in a coma, and he's basically being used as a replacement, clearly being taken advantage of, and quite frankly treated differently. So, which is why he sets off on a journey to find the blue fairy, which he learns from a story, to make him human. And in Hook, which is about a grown-up version of Peter Pan, he's a workaholic lawyer and a bit of a killjoy jerk who doesn't have much time for his kids. But when his kids are kidnapped, he has to reclaim his literal inner child. And I'm also very fond of his visual effects and his various techniques, like in Saving Private Ryan. You notice how handheld the camera is and how fast-paced the missiles and bullets are. And you might notice the lighting, which I think makes it look quite realistic from my point of view. But there's so much I like about this guy, there's too much to say, to be honest. And apparently he's the kind of guy who goes for another take. And I think that's good going, because in case anything goes wrong, which he once said in Empire, that he plans another take each time he films a shot. I mean, I've read it somewhere in Empire. And I think he always knows what he wants to portray on screen. And I think as a director, a director should always know what to portray on screen. To think visually and to think about the themes you want to get across to the audience. I remember working with D Script on one of his films, and he had no idea what a producer was, and which put me in a bit of peril. But in the end, when we shot, he seemed to know what he wanted on screen, and my troubles were over. And of course, I intend to direct and produce and write films, but I'm also happy to do camera work and sound recording and lights and/or editing. And some of you may be aware that I'm working on a brand new short film, which is called The Jock and the Chav. Some of you who were, I think, for those who didn't come to the pitching session last week, I'll just give a brief overview. I've written a film which is a parody of Street Fighter and Streets of Rage, various other video games I played from the 90s. And yes, as you can see, it's about them two fighting, and this chap here, he's got the literal power of speech. And basically, I'm looking for, looking to shoot sometime in April, and I might need some runners and some extras to portray the watching crowd. Someone to suss out continuity, Minaj, I'd like to thank for doing camera work. Might need an extra one as well, just to film a few just to provide a few more angles. That's all. Don't worry, you're still on board. And yeah, someone to design the life gauges. So if anyone's interested, by all means you can contact me. And here are my contacts: my mobile, my email address, and that's my YouTube account. You might have seen it on my film mashup. Oh, and that's my website. Basically what I do is I write film reviews, I write blogs, I write top 10 crap, and well, basically on film, mainly on films and on TV programs. Also responses to news articles and personal beliefs. But I'm also I've been planning to do music reviews as well. I'm currently working on my top 11 songs by David Bowie. And also, speaking of film, I've also planned to write a few film reviews on the Harry Potter franchise to mark the memory of Alan Rickman. And yeah, I also have an interest in politics. Some of you might know that I'm a member of the Labour Party. Yeah, sorry to bring that up. And that's my Twitter account. My username for Join the Band and my SoundCloud account. Basically, by the way, as I was saying about the fact that I was hoping to start a band, I'm looking for a drummer, a bass player, a keyboard player, an extra guitarist. I'll be playing guitar as well. And if any of those members sing, that's fine. I'd be happy to share vocals because I also like to play guitar. I mean, one of us could play leads, the other could play rhythm, and vice versa. I mean, like on the Rolling Stones when they share guitar techniques. I mean, Keith plays lead on one song, plays rhythm on the other, and so forth. But I don't think we'd ever get into compared to Rolling Stones because they've hired way too many extra musicians, and we're not as rich as them. Sure. I'm looking to write own stuff, maybe a few covers. Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking in more in the line of a hard rock / pop rock, a bit of blues type music. So yeah, if anybody's interested, you can come to me. So yeah, thank you all for coming to an evening with Jonathan David Ellison, and that's my full name. I'm sorry for my stammering and my occasional Tourette's. I often feel like I'm getting Tourette's syndrome. But actually, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Of all the films and directors you were talking about, which would you say has been your biggest inspiration in your own work?
What directors you mean?
The whole thing, like directors, the films you've loved as a child. What would you say your biggest inspiration has been for your own work?
Well, I mean, I mainly idolise Steven Spielberg, but obviously he creates a lot of high-budget films, which, yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of money for CGI, but I'd like to get into CGI. But I think I've been mainly following more the lines of Tim Burton and Terry Gilliam mainly. Mainly because I think of a plan B each time. I mean, and there's me like, we might need to wait. I don't think we can afford to do CGI. I don't even know how. I know. Let's try model. I think. Actually, no. Let's try. Motion. And particularly because I always try to follow other job roles. I mean, I have an interest in other job roles. I mean, I mentioned about camera and sound, and yeah, I mean, I know what I always want to portray if I was leading something. And yeah, did I mention I was writing a character? Yeah. Has that answered your question so far?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
So when are you looking to film the Doc in the Town?
Sometime in April. Yeah.
You see crew and stuff before then?
Well, yes. We've got pretty much cast sorted out. Well, we just need a few extras.
Are we using the same venue as we did the rehearsal?
Yes, we are. We are indeed.
Any chance seeing the script yet?
The script? What, for the Jock and the Chav? What? Do you mean the scripts that I
Have you
previously?
done a script for the film? Any chance seeing it?
Do you mean the one I'm working on?
Yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'll be happy to show you my script. I haven't got it with me, but it's actually I've got it on my hard drive. But it'll take a moment for me to set it up. Do you want to see it now?
No, I'll send you an email and I wouldn't mind reading it.
Okay. That'll be splendid. Would you like me to send you? Would you like me to write you the email address?
No, I've got your address, so I'll send you an email today.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, thanks for attending. It's been a great pleasure seeing you all.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, could someone press the red button on the camera? So, I think it's still recording.